just like to go back to the vegetarian thing just for a moment, because I'm working with a group of people at the moment who have moved from a typical Western diet into a vegan diet. And they asked me why they were feeling better. And I said, well, you know, if you'd gone vegan or say carnivore and you'd got rid of all these, you know, all these foods, you'd probably be feeling better on both. Would you expand on that a little bit for them?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, it's back to the guy who did the boot camp before the dietary guidelines. If you move from the typical diet that we're advised to eat, so it's the same in New Zealand as the UK, high in healthy whole grains, high in vegetables, high in fiber. They don't even want you eating red meat, oily fish maybe twice a week. I mean, you probably need to eat oily fish every day if you want to get some of your nutrients that you need from your food, things like calcium, phosphorus, vitamin D, and so on. So if you move from that kind of diet, and they encourage us to have treats, cheats, whatever they want to call them, and snack twice a day. So in our advice, we're actually telling people have breakfast and then snack and then have lunch and then snack and then have dinner and then have something before you go to bed or whatever. I mean, just how anyone is supposed to lose weight when basically you're just putting fuel into the tank the whole time. I have no idea. So move away from that to a real food diet and you will feel better. And that's why my first principle when people say, what should I eat? Eat real food. 3 words, eat real food. My first principle is absolutely not eat low carb or follow keto or a particular diet plan. Number 1 principle, eat real food. Now, what then gets really interesting is the next question that follows, which is what should that real food be? And that's when I go back to basics and say, okay, so what do we need? Why do we eat? Yeah, we eat because it's enjoyable, it's sociable, all the rest of it. But let's get back to the fundamentals. If we don't consume certain things, we suffer quite serious illness and we can even die. I mean, you can die from vitamin B12 deficiency or scurvy. We don't have people dying of those things nowadays. We have had a couple of vegan children who have died, which is utterly tragic because they weren't getting what they needed. But the question is, what should that real food be? So when you realize that you need complete protein, and complete protein comes from animal sources, incomplete protein comes from plant sources, when you realize that retinol comes from animals and carotene comes from plants and D3 comes from animals and the other forms of vitamin D come from plants, and the form of omegas that you need come from animals, and the forms of omega that you don't need come from plants, you just get this really consistent message that actually what we need to be eating are animal foods as a basis. And you come to the conclusion that the best things to eat to provide the nutrients that we need as human beings are meat, especially red. Red meat is better than white meat. White meat is fairly pointless nutritionally. Fish, oily rather than white. Again, white meat is fairly pointless relative to oily fish. Eggs, dairy products, and that's full fat, not low fat. And then green things. And that's essentially all that you need. Now, on top of that, I'd say fruit is a real food. If you're not diabetic, you don't have a weight problem, you don't overconsume fruit, that's a really nice thing to add in. But grains don't even come into it when you're looking at what the human body needs or nutrient density. So you could, yeah, you're going to feel better on a vegan diet if you come from a really bad diet, but that's not going to last forever. And you might find within a few months, maybe, certainly within a year or two, if you are not supplementing incredibly well, and to supplement properly as a vegan, you need to consume a source of omega-3s that comes from fish, basically, that there's no other way of putting it. So if you're a true vegan and you're trying to live off ALA and hoping that it's going to convert, I think it's only a matter of time before you have a problem. And if you're consuming fish oil, then I'm sorry, you're not pure vegan. You're doing the right thing, but you're no longer following a vegan diet. So you do get into these kind of dilemmas. But you'll feel better initially. You then might feel catastrophically worse if you went real food and then eating that real food for the nutrients it provides. So you start going down the red meat, oily fish, what we've just talked about, you will feel even better still. And it might be that that's where you end up, but you're actually going to go on a bit of a vegan detour first of all, And then you'll end up speaking at conferences because you realize just how powerful real food is relative to plant-based food. And you'll want to let other people know that look, there is a way out of diabetes and there's a way out of obesity, but it isn't calorie counting and it isn't a plant-based diet. And you're just going to be miserable if you're going hungry for the rest of your life.
Well, I think Professor Lehman says, you know, we already eat 70% of our diet from plants, and look where that's got us. So,
fair point. Yeah.
I think, I'm not sure if I've got your little quote right, but I think you say, you know, eat real food, eat animals, and eat more. Is it something like that?
Yeah, it was in response to the Michael Pollan quote when he said,
yeah,
eat food, mostly plants, not too much.
yeah.
So I said, eat food. We shouldn't have to call it real food. Eat food, mostly animals, quite a lot.
Right.
When you look, for example, if you were to get your zinc intake on a daily basis, you need a 200-gram steak. Now, you're going to get zinc from lots of different foods. So if you have a little bit of red meat and some oily fish and some eggs and some dairy and maybe even a few legumes or whatever, you're going to get bits of zinc from all of those. So it doesn't have to come from that one steak, but just to give people a guide. So I would often say to people to get 15 micrograms of vitamin D if you're not sunbathing in the winter, and if you're not supplementing, and you probably should be supplementing, you need to eat 200-gram tin of sardines with the skin and the bones, because that's where you're going to get the most vitamin D. And if you're doing that every day, brilliant. But I don't know anyone who's doing that every day. I just don't. So when you're not in the sunshine, when you're in summer, sunbathe as much as you can, safely, of course, not to burn. And when you're not in the sunshine periods, and in the UK, there's probably only a couple of months a year where we get sunshine of the quality that's going to generate serious levels of vitamin D. And for the rest of the year, if you're not having a tin of oily fish every day, a decent sized tin, you better be supplementing.
Great advice. I'm fortunate. I live in a lovely little town that I think probably has some of the best sunshine in the country.
Yay, so. Brilliant. Good on you.
Yeah. All right. So my last question is about feeding our children. So, you know, we had our first case of type 2 diabetes, I think, in a child in about 1994, and we're increasing at 3 to 5% per annum now. What is your advice to parents? How do we stop this?
Yeah, same principles for children and same principles for parents to feed children. Number one is eat real food. Number two is choose that real food for the nutrients it provides. So you should also be feeding your child red meat, oily fish, eggs, full fat dairy products, green things. Children don't have to worry anywhere near as much about carbohydrates. They don't need any, but there's no problem giving healthy carbohydrates to children. And there are some decent nutrients in legumes, for example. Now, some little people can't tolerate them because they're actually too fibrous for little tummies, and they might get tummy ache, or they might get upset constitutions or whatever. So you do have to watch out for that whenever you're giving fiber to a young person. I mean, the idea that fiber targets should apply to young people, should apply to anyone, let alone young people, I also find a bit troubling. But within the boundaries of what your child can tolerate, fruit children will enjoy, and there's nothing wrong with fruit for a healthy child or whatever. So it's those same kind of principles. Then one of the main principles that I add on top for parents bringing up children is please don't ever, in any circumstance, lead a child to think that any kind of junk food is a treat. You've got to explain to your child that this is junk, and it's what we call a cheat. It's not what we call a treat. So yes, you can have chocolate. You had some chocolate when you were younger, so did I. We had some fizzy drinks, but you let them know that these things are harmful. They taste incredible. They taste unreal because they've been engineered to taste that good. So you educate them before you start giving them that kind of thing. So I worked with a TV producer once who used to say to her 7-year-old boy, you can have one bad thing today. And that would be a small confectionery thing, or it would be a small fizzy drink, or it would be some crisps. And how long is it, do you think, before the 7-year-old says, so mummy, why do I have any bad things? That's the question you then want the child to ask. And then you're having a grown-up conversation with the 7-year-old to, well, actually, it would be better for you if you made that choice that you don't have any bad things, or you have them very rarely. And then you can start talking to children about nutrition. But don't, whatever you do, make anybody grow up thinking that chocolate is a treat, or crisps are a treat, or ice cream is a treat. The fake food companies are doing that for you all the time. So you need to counter it. Christmas, sweets, happiness, treat. Halloween, treats, sweets. They will do that for us. Birthdays, Mother's Day. They are doing that for us. Easter. There are so many festivities where they make sure that feeling happy is associated with eating junk. And then what happens?
Sad too, Zoe. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
But sad too, you know.
Totally good point. So you fall over. There. We'll go and get a chocolate bar. We'll go and get a sweetie out of the sweet tin. We'll go and get an ice cream. Your friend is falling out with you at school. Let's go and get an ice cream or a biscuit or something. If your child has fallen out with a friend, you need to counsel your child. You need to listen to them. You need to understand them. You need to give them coping mechanisms. The last thing that you should do is have a biscuit and everything will be okay. Because those are the people that you and I then work with when we're trying to help adults overcome obesity. And we're telling them to eat real food, and they can't stick to a real food diet because every negative emotion that they encounter, they're used to addressing with eating junk. So the boss is mean to them, they reach for a biscuit. Their children are playing up, they reach for a muffin. Mum is being difficult or whatever, so they reach for something else. And they don't have the coping mechanisms that they need for the rest of their life to deal with a negative emotion. So then you say to them, they get to the point, let's say, when they do need to do something about their weight problem because they've just been diagnosed as type 2 diabetic. That's what tends to happen, because the pain is a much greater motivator than gain. So that's when you get to the point that they come to you and I and say, enough is enough. I've got to do something about this. What do I do? And we say, eat real food, choose that food for the nutrients it provides. And that means moving away from the carbohydrates, and you've got to stop eating sugar and white flour. And then they have their first upsetting experience and they can't reach for that biscuit. And the emotion is so raw because they've never worked out how to deal with it. They might be 50 years old now and they've never known how to deal with sadness, anger, upset, outrage. Why are so many people putting on weight during lockdown? Yes, they might be a little bit more bored than usual, but surely you've got less opportunity to get junk food in because you're not going to the petrol station, you're not going into the newsagents, you're not going to the cinema, you're not confronted with it the whole time. But when people are going out and bringing junk back into the house, they're then eating it on a more frequent basis. And I suggest some of that is that they just don't know how to cope with the outrage that they might feel, or the fear or the negative emotions that they have never been taught how to overcome. So please, parents, never, ever, ever tell a child that junk is a treat and that it will cheer them up, because you are setting them up for a lifetime of being in big trouble.
That's a really good point. Thank you. And nobody's ever raised that before, so I really appreciate that insight. I think one of the things I see or I feel a lot is, for people, every meal has to be special, you know. And, you know, in my head, I'm like, it's just food. But anyway.
It's fuel, yeah. To me, it's fuel. It's really nice fuel, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I enjoy eating, but anyway.
It's fuel, yeah.
So just to finish up, do you want to tell us a little bit about where we can find you? I'll put your website on the show notes. So have you got any other like social media accounts or anything where people can follow your work? And
yeah, I've got a Facebook thing. I'm never in there. I've probably got 3,000 friends or something, most of whom I don't even know. I'm just not in Facebook. I can't find my way around it. I don't understand it. If you'll find me anywhere, and I tend not to be anywhere for very long, it would be on Twitter, where I'm just at Zoe Harcombe.
Okay.
And that you can find on my website. My website is the main thing, which is zoeharcombe.com.
Right.
But I think I've got something on Instagram, but I'm not sure if I've ever really posted anything. All of those things can just take up so much time, and
yeah,
I'm not
and
sure.
we'll put some
healthy,
links to your books as well. So you've got 2 books out.
I've got loads actually. So the Why Do You Overeat was the first one. There's Stop Counting Calories and Start Losing Weight. There's the Harcombe Diet for Men, which is sort of about that thick. It's about, I don't know how many pages, but men don't want to read about diet, so it's so short. But I mean,
just give me the facts.
Yeah, tell me what I need to do. So I mean, you could read that in 15 minutes on the loo or whatever. Then I did one with Hodder, the 3-step plan. There's an obesity book, which is quite a heavyweight academic book. And then what we tend to do at the moment is collaborative works for charity. So we did the Diabetes Unpacked for the Noakes Foundation. We're looking at doing another one. I won't say what it is, but that's going to be for a UK charity.
So that's this one here, the diabetes.
Yay, brilliant. That is fabulous. The people in that, that's just incredible.
Yeah.
So we publish books as well to help people who've got a message to get to market. Not because books make any money, because they just don't. People don't understand the economics of publishing. Unless you're J.K. Rowling, they don't make money. But it's handy being able to get work like that to market. So we have a nutrition professor in the UK, for example, who had a book that he wanted to write because he was around at the time that the guidelines were being set, and has now realized how wrong they were. And he'd never get published, and he might have moved 1,000 copies or something, which doesn't even make a return, but he's got his message out there and he's thrilled to bits. And that's the kind of thing that we enjoy doing.
Oh, that's great. Well, I will seek out, I presume all your books are on Amazon, are they?
Yes, I'm pretty sure they are. Yeah, and I'm never quite sure how it works in New Zealand and Australia.
I'll find the links anyway, and I'll make sure that we include them as well. And on my resources page, you've got a couple of YouTube, well, you've got tons of YouTube videos out there, but there are a couple that I think are exceptionally good. So I'll make sure that we get those linked up there as well.
Oh, thank you. The calorie one. Because we've been talking about that, that's the one that I would recommend. So there was one at the Public Health Collaboration, I think it was 2018 that I did the calorie one. And then there was another one, and it's either on the Low Carb Down Under website or again, the Public Health Collaboration one. And I did one on fiber, which I think people find quite useful.
We haven't talked about fibre at all, but I'll go and seek out that fibre one. And people can just find you by, searching for Zoe Harcombe on YouTube, and they'll find all the various interviews and videos you've got. So, but I'll look out for that fibre one as well. That's great. Is there anything else you want to share, or?
I don't think so, actually. I think we have to go out foraging soon, which is what it's called now. It takes so long to get food. I think we have to head out with our bags and wait in queues and do this insane stuff that's going on at the moment.
Well, Zoe, I am so grateful and appreciative of you coming and sharing just all your wealth of information with us. And I'm sure everybody will find this just amazing information that they haven't really heard anywhere else. So really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your great questions, and thank you for seeking me out and inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we were lucky. Thanks to Andy again for getting us
spotted it.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you.